Hi, I'm Sharaad Kuttan and welcome to Let's Talk, the show that brings you the most important conversations in art, culture and in ideas. Today we have on the show a very special person, Shahidul Alam, because he's a well-known photographer and a man who's been in the public eye for perhaps reasons that photographers don't often want to find themselves in, the circumstances they want to find themselves in. And we're going to be talking about a launch of his book that happened in Kuala Lumpur recently. He's the founder of an agency, the Dirk agency, and also of a school called Pachala, which trains photographers. Thank you so much, Shahidul, for joining me. You're from Bangladesh, and you've done quite a bit of work around the world as well. You, of course, also been recently released from prison, where you were held on charges, and you're going to have to talk me through that. But I want to begin with this book, the book that you've come to Kuala Lumpur for, The Tide Will Turn. It's a book about Bangladesh, isn't it? Tell us about it. What exactly is this book intended for?
The book was largely in response to the current political situation. I mean, it's not only in Bangladesh, of course. You've got repressive regimes all across the globe. And there are governments that are very terrified of dissent. They want this extreme control. In Bangladesh in particular, our problem has been this special law that was put in, the draconian law. Initially it was Section 57B, and then it was substituted by even worse one, the Digital Security Act. But the book itself actually begins from a very specific incident. On the 29th of July 2018, two young students, Mim and Rajib, were standing outside a school waiting for the bus. The bus mowed them down. They died immediately, and 11 other students were injured. Of course, it was a very sad and horrific incident. But the events that followed led to something that identifies what has happened or is happening in Bangladesh. There was a countrywide protest. Students were out in the streets. The government, instead of responding to their demands, turned their hoodlums on them, supported by the police. And I was documenting it, as a journalist must. On the 4th of August, I got attacked, my equipment smashed, but I continued reporting. On the 5th of August, again, I was doing live feeds. I also gave an interview to Al Jazeera. That night, I was alone in the flat uploading my stuff when plainclothes people came into my flat, and basically I got abducted. And that led to, amongst other things, you know, apart from my torture, I spent over 100 days in jail. But eventually there was a nationwide protest and a global protest of phenomenal proportions. And after rejecting my bail 5 times, I was given bail on the 6th, and I'm out on bail.
You know, there were actually images of you, Shahidul, being taken to court with your shirt, I guess, or whatever you were wearing, caked
Punjabi,
in blood. Caked in blood. But for people who don't understand Bangladesh politics, it seems like you stood accused of somehow besmirching the reputation of the Bangladesh government or Bangladesh as a nation because of that interview you gave to the foreign press. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, was that the worst thing that you could do, give an interview to the foreign press and be critical of your government?
I think I'm critical of the actions of my government. The government is my government. It belongs to the people. And I certainly have no intentions of undermining that. What I do have serious objections to is when the government does not work in the interest of the people. And that is what every conscientious citizen should be doing. The problem is we live in a very repressive environment. It's a culture of fear, so not many people are speaking. There are important exceptions, but because not many people are speaking, the ones who do become that much more conspicuous.
I mean, Bangladesh is a democracy. I understand the Awami League, that is the government of the day, has been out of power. But tell us about the dynamic now. I mean, what exactly is the situation, especially responses from the media community, of which you're part of as a photographer and also as a commentator. What is the balance of forces now between the Awami League government and civil society?
It's full spectral control. I mean, you mentioned democracy. I mean, we had a rigged election where some of the people got more than 100% votes.
Interesting
Yes.
mathematical
Absolutely,
possibility.
yes.
Okay.
But leaving that aside, I think the institutions that are meant to be state institutions and serving the interests of the public have essentially become tools of the government and part of this repressive regime. So the judiciary, the police, the bureaucracy have all become part of that structure, which makes it very difficult for people in civil society or ordinary people generally. The worst thing is, because there is absolutely no space for dissent, it means that there is really, as I mentioned before, full spectral control. And I think that is where the problem was, that I was putting a dent into that structure. I was speaking out what everyone else felt, but was not prepared to say.
Is this yet another dent, and what kind of impact does a book like this make on a society like yours?
The book itself, I think, is significant in the sense that this is today the only book out there that is openly asking those questions. I'm sure there are others who want to bring out the book, but just don't feel safe enough to do so. There might well be books outside. I mean, our Chief Justice Sinha was sent on exile, and he's brought out a book from exile, which is also critical. But by and large, books within Bangladesh just do not have the writers within Bangladesh just do not have the space to write a critical book. We've decided to do so regardless. And the book has been very well received. More importantly for me, the title is stolen. While I was in jail, Arundhati Roy wrote a letter to me where she talked about the tide will turn, because she talked about what was happening in India, what was happening elsewhere, and that we the people would reclaim this space. And I wrote back after being released. And in a sense, of course, with her permission, I felt that that was what would set the tone.
Wonderful. Okay, we'll take a short break. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned to Let's Talk. Welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm Sharaad, and with me, Shahidul Alam. He's a well-known photographer from Bangladesh. He's the author of this handsome book collection of images, but also a story of an essay about his nation. And Shahidul, I want to ask you about this and tell us a little bit about all your trajectory. I mean, you started off with an academic career in Britain, I believe. And was it chemistry that you were teaching?
Organic chemistry.
Organic chemistry, you were teaching that. You came back and you became a photographer, and that's such an amazing career shift. And how that decision that you made way back then and the kind of work that you do today, because a lot of people think of photographers as kind of mute witnesses, documenters of the world around them and not active participants. Tell us about that. I mean, that shape of your own professional trajectory.
Yeah. I mean, organic chemistry was a product of a middle-class upbringing. Basically, you become a doctor, an engineer, or a chemist to get a respectable profession. I was then, while I was doing my PhD, I was very involved with the Socialist Workers' Party, and I began to see how effectively photographs were being used.
This was in Britain?
In Britain.
This is Vanessa Redgrave's
yes,
party.
that sort of time. In fact, Solidarność, the Poland liberation movement and all that sort of thing. So in the streets, feeling the heat of that environment and everything else. And I thought, well, does Bangladesh need yet another research chemist? I was always interested in social justice. I'd left a country that had fought a battle to be liberated.
In 1971?
Exactly. And I'd left shortly after that. And I felt that was the land I was going to go back to, and I needed the tools. And no tool was going to be as powerful as the visual image, as the photograph. So that was a conscious decision. I didn't know if I could make a living as a photographer, but I was going to give it a go. When I came back, this was 1984, I saw that my country, which I'd left as an independent state, was under military control. There was Hussein Mohammad Ershad, the general, who was calling the shots. He was the president. So I became very involved in trying to dismantle that regime. And that was how I began my activism within Bangladesh. In terms of you talking about what photography does, I didn't come in because of photography. I came in as an activist. I wanted to bring about social change, and I picked up what I thought was the most powerful tool available. As long as that tool continues to be powerful, I will use it. If tomorrow it ceases to be powerful, I'll have no problems abandoning it.
Yeah, and where does the power of the image come from? Because we have voice, we have sound, we have all kinds of sensors. Why do you think the visual image today is so powerful?
It penetrates at a level that others cannot. I mean, the visual image is something you absorb way before you've even had a time to resist it. And it's also very insidious in the way in which not only do you confront it as you see it, but it haunts you, it seeps in, it gets into your skin. And it is that power, I think, that combined with other things, it's a question of how people use it, of course. And you look at turning points in history, how photographs at certain points have caused those inflections. Okay.
This book, which is titled My Journey as a Witness, tell us a little bit about this.
This happened, this actually started off as a book of essays. And I was one of the early bloggers in Bangladesh, and friends of mine who read my pieces wanted to have a collection. And I was interested. Skira, a very well-known publisher, Italian publisher, they brought out the first book of Matisse with Picasso's illustrations and things like that. They approached me to do my book, and they said, we can't do your book without photographs. So it morphed into this book. But that, in a sense, talks not only about the political journey, but also about the photographic movement and how that evolved. And I've built institutions, the Dhrik Agency, Pathshala, the School of Photography, which now many consider to be perhaps the finest school of photography in the world, and the Chobi Mela Festival, which was the first photo festival in Asia and now is the trendsetter in that sense. So it does talk about that aspect of it, but to a large extent it is about social justice. It's about how people's lives are interwoven and our struggle.
It's really interesting because, you make the point, it's not just a tool, it's not just a medium, but a worldview. You brought a worldview to this particular medium. And I want to talk about this book too, because here it is, you in Malaysia. And so this is called Best Years of My Life. It's a book about the Bangladeshi migrant in Malaysia. Why did you seek to look at this book? I mean, Bangladeshi migrants are all over. I mean, the Bangladeshi diaspora is huge and really spread out. Why Malaysia?
Well, firstly, the title, The Best Years of My Life. It's ironic. I was doing a story on migration generally, and I've been working on migration for a very long time. And the Bangladeshi migrants in France live between Gare du Nord and Gare de l'Est. And there was
These are train stations.
These are two train stations in the center of Paris. And the shop owner I'd become friendly with says, maybe you should go upstairs. And that's where the bunk beds are. And they sleep in those tiered things, and they go out and sell roses. And I meet this young guy, and he says, yes, it's when it's not raining and when the police aren't chasing me, it's not a bad life. But I'm giving away the best years of my youth. Who will ever give that back to me? And that got me thinking about the sacrifices the workers make. And Bangladesh's economy is built on migrant labor, on garment workers, and our farmers in the field. And we treat these people abysmally, as you do, sadly, in your country and elsewhere. Our economies have gained so much from the toil of these people. Yet
from the remittances.
From the remittances for us, and from what they do for you. Yet neither of us really recognize or respect those people. And I felt it was time to pay homage to those people.
But this book is also kind of interesting in that there's many textures. It's not just about the individual who's oppressed or is exploited. It's also about some success stories or about the movers and shakers in the ecosystem of the migrant community here, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that was it's good you've observed that. Part of the point was to humanize the story, because at the end of the day, there is a very particular representation that the migrants have, that it is complex, that it's multi-layered, and that they are like you and me, other human beings with the same emotions, with successes and failures, and the emotional responses they have to that. And in doing the book, not only did I look at workers, I looked at employers, bureaucrats, activists, the workers themselves.
And a couple of datos.
Yes, exactly, absolutely. And success stories.
Right. Okay, we'll take another short break. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned to Let's Talk. Welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm Sharaad. With me, Shahidul Alam. He's a photographer from Bangladesh, because well known for the agency he set up, Dirk agency, also a school, Pachala, which has produced many award-winning students. And I remember I sent you a message from Mumbai, where I was witnessing a photography festival. I said to you, oh, there are 3 Bangladeshi out of 17 photographers representing this particular show. And then you said 2 of them were your students. And I was actually really chuffed. You must have been really chuffed to see the success of the young Bangladeshis that you've trained. I want to ask you about this exhibition that is now being held in New York. Tell us about that. What's happening there?
It's called Truth to Power. It was
from the expression speaking truth to power.
Absolutely. And it was the decision to have the show. It was interesting. My partner would visit me every day while I was in jail. And the cacophony, the sound is so high, you can hardly hear each other. So she had that little sign up saying, "Are you interested in a show at the Rubin?" And the Rubin is, of course...
she wrote it on a piece of paper to get a response.
Exactly. We had a binary system. I would have yes and no's, and that's how we communicated. But that was the message. And Rubin is not known for showing photography. They show art generally. But the 2 photographers they'd shown until then were Katia Bresso and Mark Rabu. So it's a tough act to follow. But of course, I wasn't going to turn it down. But the decision was made while I was in jail. And then the curator from Rubin came over to Dhaka once I was released. And we met, we talked about the show. And it's a major retrospective, and the first retrospective I'm having in the US. It's actually going on. It opened on the 7th of November and goes on till the 4th of May. But it looks at really my work over the years. Obviously, there's far too much work to be put into one show, so there are segments that are left out and segments that are condensed. But it does look overall at the trajectory in terms of the talking truth to power, as it suggests, where I've questioned power, but also the vocabulary that I've used over that period of time. The fact that over time I've looked at other ways of engagement, and I'm a strategist. I look to produce work that will have maximum impact. So work like the work on the Rohingyas, for instance, and the early work on the struggle for democracy is more linear, more like the traditional photojournalistic Magnum-like work, whereas later work, which is about the disappearance of Kalpana Chakma, the indigenous activist in Bangladesh, uses a very, very different technique and is much more conceptual. There is also a segment which was produced after I came out of jail. And my niece, Sophia Karim, who's an architect and an artist, and I worked together where she relied on my memory to build 3D architectural models of my life in jail. And that is also part of the show.
Fascinating. When does it come to Asia? This show? Will it come? Will it travel?
I would like it to. It's a major show, but it's now in New York, then it goes to Houston, then it probably goes to Dallas. Melbourne has just been asking for it, but I've had questions from Asia, but I would certainly like to bring it.
I want to ask you about the training you're giving, right? So you have this amazing trajectory, and you have had success, and I'm sure a lot of young people want the success you've achieved from, a life of work. What do you say to them? How do you instill in them, apart from this desire for fame or fortune and all these things that many of us do actually want secretly, that worldview? Because as we noted earlier, you started with a worldview. How do you instill that in young people?
I think we are part of a connected world. And, okay, we talk about social media and other things making people insular, but in fact, it opens up the possibilities. And your well-being affects mine, and the other way around. And I don't think that's something we can forget. And also, I actually believe in a borderless world. I see myself as a citizen of the globe, and I want to make my mark on that basis. And the betterment of the planet is in your interest and mine. And I think, sure, wanting fame is not a problem, and fame and glory are all fine, but at the end of the day, passion is something you have to have, otherwise none of that arrives.
I want to, in the remaining minutes that we have to talk about Bangladesh again. So you have this amazing diaspora. They're living in very, very different contexts, authoritarian contexts like Malaysia, or soft authoritarian, or Singapore, but they're also living in the democratic West and so on and so forth. When they come back to Bangladesh, what do they bring with them? And do they bring also aspirations for a different type of Bangladesh?
I think they do. What they don't always realize is it doesn't happen easy. And I think if you look at those people who've gone and come back, in a sense, someone like me is a very privileged person in a country like Bangladesh. The fact that I don't have to worry about whether I'm having breakfast tomorrow or food tomorrow in itself makes me privileged. Yet from that position of privilege, we do not consider it that the onus is upon us to ensure that the very people who gave us that privilege we need to give something back. And I think that is why they should come back. And I think the onus is upon all of us to ensure that it is a better Bangladesh for the average Bangladeshi. That is the Bangladesh that we fought for. That is the Bangladesh that liberation was about. And today, while the GDP has gone up, the wealth inequality has also gone up enormously. And people forget that Bangladesh today has the fastest growing wealthy people in the world.
I mean, I was in Dhaka just a couple of months ago. You're building a mass rapid, not you, but a mass rapid transit system is being built in Dhaka city. Income inequalities, climate change. We know Bangladesh is one of those countries that's going to be severely affected by rising sea levels. Is that factoring into your current work?
Very much so. In fact, I will be giving a keynote on the 9th of March at UNESCO in Paris on that very theme. And a lot of the work that we've done has built on it. But my work largely is about social justice. And I think environmental justice, food politics are also integral parts of that. And we cannot, politics is about power relationships. And at the end of the day, politics is the price of rice. You can't ignore that.
What would you say to young aspiring photographers? I mean, words of wisdom, what do you have for them?
Believe, be passionate, but one thing we cannot forget, I mean, there is this thing, a bohemian concept of how the artist doesn't worry about worldly things. You need to work bloody hard. There's no compromise.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Shahidul.
Cheers.
I've been speaking to Shahidul Alam, founder of Direct Agency, also the school Pachala, which is School of Photography, founder of a photography festival in Bangladesh, and now has an exhibition in New York. This has been Let's Talk. I'm Sharaad Kuttan, only for Astro One.
Thank you
Very much.